Hello and welcome to Make It Work, the bi-weekly podcast where we uncover inspiring stories of modern working mamas in Asia who have redefined their career paths whilst putting family first.
Hi, I'm Sarah Wong, and welcome to the second installment of our interview with Claire Harbour, the fourth coach in our special Coaching and Counselor series. Claire is a single mother to four now adult children, a former executive, an author, podcast host, and is currently a coach to women leaders navigating big transitions. In the first of our two-part interview, Claire shared with us how her client relationships were key in enabling her to juggle work and life, and impressed upon us the importance of asking for what we need. In the second part, she discusses common struggles she has seen amongst women in mid-career and offers tools in overcoming them. But first, I asked Claire to share a story or two about inspiring women she's met along her coaching journey. You don't want to miss this, so come join in our conversation. All right, thanks, Claire. Would you be able to share maybe a story or two about how you've met some interesting women who've made it work?
Absolutely. She's an amazing woman called Ashley Connell. She's American, and she's built a company called Prowess. It's an enterprise which trains women, stay-at-home mothers, typically to become very strong partners and assistants in other people's businesses. And so she has this beautiful virtual circle going on of training people and then supplying them to business owners. Now, it sounds wonderful, and Ashley's really convincing, and she's incredibly confident. She had a very powerful career before becoming a mother, but actually, like most of us at that stage in life, I think she's got a 2-year-old, if I remember rightly, a lot of the time she's struggling and wondering why her husband isn't helping her more, or how on earth she's going to manage looking after the baby because the baby can't be at nursery because the baby's got a cold and she's got 3 client meetings. It's tough. It's real. It's gritty. It's not always easy. She was in tears many times. She wouldn't mind me sharing that because guess what? We all end up in tears many times. It is tough. But one of the things that we worked on a lot was not just submitting to the toughness of the business, but also learning to build boundaries and be more tough again about what we want as working women within our context. So, again, Ashley did find ways to have those difficult conversations with her husband, who thought he was helping, but wasn't actually helping in the way she needed. And so having those complex explorations of what's going to help all of us can be difficult to start and even quite difficult to navigate because sometimes we don't even really know what we want. Sometimes it's more a question of having experienced what we don't want, not necessarily knowing how to move towards that ideal state or semi-ideal state that we aspire to. A tip that emerged from that is that in the end, it's not possible for everybody, but it's possible more often than we think. That notion of you need to spend some money and effort in order to get the assistance that you need that liberates you to do the really important stuff. Find out where your biggest priorities are within your working and home life. And with those priorities in a list, do what you can to either get things done yourself, dump them, delegate them, or delay them. That could be as much in having somebody come in and prepare 3 meals a week as it might be in having a business assistant. So lots of different ways to play with it. But the important thing is playing. The important thing is exploring what's going to accelerate your rise to where you need and want to be in the smartest way.
Very
That said,
practical.
I do think that it's also worth just reflecting somewhat on the question of whether indeed being a working mother is as big a drama as we like to think it is. I mean, yeah, it's complicated. And I wouldn't want to diminish the challenge. And I speak from experience. And of course, I probably have somewhat rose-tinted spectacles at this point. But, I did raise 4 children alone, so I've definitely been there. But a lot of this, without overall diminishing the challenge, is a question of practice, juggling things, whether it's juggling activities, priorities, emotions, or whatever else, is a question of practice. And we probably all have some kind of practice of that juggling long before we get to having babies and young children. And so calling back on the feelings, the ideas, the practice of juggling, doing, dumping, delegating, delaying, all that kind of thing is probably not completely unknown to us. So let's not also magnify beyond the level of reality what it is to be a working mother. remember to pull on whatever that prior experience might be. It could be looking after a sick relative. It could be, something else that has come up to make our paths not completely smooth, and draw on that, learn from it, and use it to keep as much serenity as is possible during that period of having the intensity of small children and work.
Right. We don't want to over dramatize it or give it more power than it really has on us.
Absolutely.
And but at the same time, being realistic and having good tools and constant, I think, revision of this whole dumping, delegating, delaying. I think because things keep changing as we grow, as our children grow as well. I think it's about that constant reviewing, because nothing stays constant. Right.
Nothing stays constant. And it's one of the biggest, damning factors, but also exciting factors of the journey through parenting and work. Just when you think you've got something figured out, something changes. So it is a constant, even if you do that proactive questioning, that's one thing, but even without the proactive questioning, things will change anyway. So, it's a question of deciding that there's a practical part to cover, which might be about, I actually will have to get up an hour earlier every day, or find somebody else to carpool the kids, or whatever it might be. But it's also a question of that more inner thinking, going really deep inside and figuring out what your values truly are, and allowing to see where those values may or may not have shifted. There is an argument that says values tend to stay very static, but I really don't see that in life. It doesn't necessarily mean that somebody who totally upholds a very powerful A will completely shift to holding up a very powerful Z, but there's a lot on the spectrum between A and Z, whatever a value might be about. So it's likely they'll shift. When you're a young, selfish, inherently, nicely selfish executive with not a care in the world, you're going to have a different set of values, however hard you try to, stay static, than you will have once you're a mother of 3 with a husband and a mom living in your apartment, or whatever it might be. Bound to shift. But figure out what they are, because it's easy to assume that, your values are Chinese Singaporean values, or, Southern Indian values, or whatever. It's never as simple as that. We all have our own unique set, and understanding them and seeing how they shift, that's important. And be honest about your priorities. Not everybody does want to go back to work full time. Some people want to go back full time and completely hand over their child to a nanny. Right. But if you're not honest about what you want, and you can't be until you figured out your values, then you get into trouble. And definitely find ways to embrace that new identity that you're getting as you become a mother and then a working mother. And as you get that new identity, don't be afraid to grieve somewhat for the old identity. There's nothing wrong with that. You probably wouldn't want to spend the whole of the rest of your life grieving, because that would be a pretty sad life. But being honest and saying, I kind of did like the way I was before, and I don't necessarily like all the changes that have had to happen. That's okay. Again, it's that question of honesty and expressing what's really going on in here, not just pretending it's okay. But also finding new ways. We've said this in various different ways, but I just want to underline it again. Finding new ways to be courageous in your communication, your negotiation, and your toughness of stance. And by the way, stop apologizing for being a woman or a mom. It's so important. And we all do it. And, I still find myself doing it now and then, but I slap myself on the face pretty quickly. There's also questions around energy and organization. And that is, again, mostly a question of creating a vision of what's needed and how realistic it is. We might have this fantastic imagined version of a beautiful life with everything running smoothly. That may not be quite reasonable. But one exercise that I often get clients to do is to think about something called your ideal ordinary day. So not the ideal day in which you've got unicorns and rainbows and the sky's pink and you're floating around beautifully, but a typical day. And then literally taking it, 15-minute chunk by 15-minute chunk. What are the things that you absolutely want in that ordinary day? They might be practical things. They could be experiences. They could be conversations, but defining that in minute detail, but underlining it's ideal, like it's the kind of ideal ordinary day. And you may not be able to get that fully, but the more specific and clear you are about what you want, the more likely you are to be able to create it by behaving as the person who wants that kind of day and get there eventually, before your values change and your ordinary day, in an ideal sense, shifts somewhat. But the more you're conscious about it, the more you're specific about it, then the more likely you are to get there.
Oh, great. Okay. So that's one way of reflecting to really understand where your values, your priorities are by asking the simple question. And then,
Literally thinking about the
yeah.
very practical issues of how do I reflect those values and priorities in the way I'm going to be living my days.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, that's a very doable kind of exercise that anyone can do.
Yeah,
15
just
minutes.
remember not to put too many rainbows and unicorns in it.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. All right. Well, with that, Claire, I would love to have a couple more questions to round out our time here. So you just concluded the 100 Women in 100 Days project, which I was part of, where essentially you were talking to 100 women wanting to make big, meaningful changes in their lives. And this was also how I revealed, I think, to a living human being for the first time that I was thinking about a podcast. You were obviously very instrumental in encouraging me that way. So now that it's concluded and you have this new initiative, The Safe, which I'd love for you to talk a little bit more about. Can you talk about the outcomes of that, expected and unexpected?
Absolutely. Well, the whole thing was unexpected. I think I shared with you at the outset that, I just woke up one late April morning thinking, oh, what am I going to do this summer? Through various short and fairly unthought through bits of reflection, I decided I'm going to coach 100 women that I don't yet know this summer and see what happens. And so I was curious to find out what would emerge in those sessions.
Yeah.
And, I wondered whether I might write a book or a paper or something like that. But in the end, it was just curiosity, oozing out. And so indeed, with, telling people about it and connections and people recommending on, then indeed I did speak to a little over 100 women, actually, over the period of 100 days. It was pretty intensive. I was very glad when it came to an end, not because I hadn't enjoyed it, but because it was, in addition to everything else I do, really quite a lot of work, but it was incredibly interesting. The themes that emerged, the things that women showed up with were, in the end, and maybe this will feel like an anticlimax, not that surprising. Because in the end, there's only a limited number of themes that really exist in life, in psychology. And what I found was that, of course, I was typically in these sessions speaking with women who are a bit younger than my typical one-to-one clients. That's not a surprise because my typical one-to-one clients are paying a lot of money for that service, and women in their 20s and 30s don't necessarily have that money. So I think that's why the age group thing emerged. But I was keen to understand more about what's preoccupying younger women in their lives and their careers, not least because I'm hopeful that you guys, or you girls, you women, are going to be the ones who will finally change the paradigm of crappy leaders who are mostly white males who mostly don't keep their word in anything. So, it's up to you to pick up from wherever we will have got to in changing that. So what did I discover? Lots of fear of change. I mean, that's a basic human instinct, but lots of fear of change and resistance to change. A stated desire to change, but then actually being stuck in it. Loads of black and white thinking. People thinking that I have to be this way or I could be that way, but not seeing that it might be possible for both to happen or for there to be some gray, lots of gray sitting between that black and white and not daring to explore it. Lots of something that we could generally classify as lack of self-esteem, which doesn't necessarily mean that everybody was sad and retiring and deeply in that lack of self-esteem. But it comes back to what we were talking about earlier about that sort of permission to ask for what you want, what you need, feeling that, you're not quite worthy yet of this or that thing that you might really like. And linked to that, not necessarily being very strong with setting boundaries, not even necessarily seeing that boundaries are an important part of life. So those were probably the biggest themes that emerged, though I'm pleased to say over 100 women showing up. Then there were lots of beautiful stories, amazing stories, lots of moments of clarity and insight within those conversations. Some people, had a massive aha moment. Others were a bit quieter. Few, of course, walked away with, not necessarily that much changed, but most women came with real energy and curiosity to explore something. You certainly fitted into that mode. And it was an extraordinary thing. And what emerged was that many women said, gosh, I wish I could do a bit more of this. And not all of them were able to say, can we do some of that? And, can I pay you a lot of money to be a private client? So it started to seem to me that it could be interesting to, somehow play on the energy of this, this initiative and create a women's coaching group that would be more accessible to younger women. I wanted to create something that would allow women to continue to work with me, but also with each other. So I created this community called The Safe, which is designed for younger women. The average age is about the average age of those who came to the coaching sessions, mid-30s, early mid-30s. And we meet twice a month. And sometimes we work with a theme. Sometimes we simply work with whatever somebody shows up with. We coach, we reflect, we reframe, we get ambitious. We are definitely safe. It's a place where you can bring any thinking, any ideas, things that you weren't daring to express in other spaces and places. And it's turning into a really extraordinary group. So I'm very proud that that I decided to create it. And I'm super proud of those who have joined and the courage that they're bringing to the conversations that they're coming along with. And it's been wonderful just in the last couple of sessions to hear of women who've already got themselves new jobs or taken, really big steps in terms of the courage that they're playing with to demand more of themselves and of the people and things around them.
Thank you. Thank you, Claire, for the work that you do and the heart that you put in it. I think more importantly, I'm just thinking about what you said about the ending climax moment of actually when you found out wasn't that new. And it's funny because I think it's recurring kind of themes, like you said, there are only certain themes. And I think, but it's true. I think all of us can relate to it. So with that, what is one thing you would love listeners to take away from our conversation today? There is only one thing.
Just one thing. Well, I think it's that overall theme of going inside, finding your values, believing in the significance of those values, and finding the courage to ask for, demand, seek out what you truly want. And that can play out in all kinds of different ways. And we are all as powerful as we want to be, as we choose to be. That's something that it's terribly easy to forget when you're stuck at home with a snotty-nosed toddler, but we really are very powerful.
Great. And if listeners want to connect with you, what do you love talking about, learning about?
Well, you've probably, heard quite a lot of it today, but I guess if I were to summarize it into 3 buckets, then I'd talk about, women's role in society and in business, in the world, the power and leadership that we're capable of. Obviously, coaching and personal growth in any respect, and career transitions, career agility, and breaking free from the chains of other people's expectations. And I'd love to do more speaking in companies and inspire people that way. So anyone who ends up listening who feels that they need a keynote speaker on some of these topics for a next time, that is something I would really like to be doing more.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Claire, for your time. It felt like another coaching session for me.
Well, if it gets you thinking a bit more and re-examining things, then that's wonderful. But I've really enjoyed it, Sarah. Thank you so much.
Thank you for listening to Make It Work, where we uncover inspiring stories of modern working mamas in Asia who have redefined their careers whilst putting family first. Please help others discover the show by leaving a review and rating on wherever you get your podcast. And see you at the next episode of Make It Work.